Welcome to Destination Animation, your trip around the world of cartoons and anime, stop motion and puppetry, special effects and CGI, and everything in between. I'm your host, Becca McGraw.
And I am Carrie Dreblow.
And I'm Jason Knott, and today we're talking about Don Bluth's 1982 debut theatrical film, The Secret of NIMH.
Wow.
Woo!
Indeed.
And why are we talking about Secret of NIMH today?
Because it is my favorite animated movie.
Wow, why is that?
Because I used to watch it, all the time. That's part of the reason why. When I was a kid, in, preschool, the kindergarten, for some reason, my morning ritual consisted of watching this movie before we went to school. Because I had,
in its entirety, or?
Yeah, in its entirety.
Wow.
Every day. And, I would watch it, scattered throughout the day, too, sometimes. And I remember I would get a lot of nightmares from it, but I would still watch it. And I can remember a lot of those nightmares, and I can tell you in detail the things that happen in them. Oh,
no. It is kind of a creepy movie.
It is, but I love it.
Do they involve, giant owls and scary spiders?
There is one no spiders, but some of them involve the owl, some of them involve dragon, some of them involve Nicodemus, some of them involve a few
scary things. He's a good guy.
Brutus. Well, in one of the dreams I had, Nicodemus is, being crazy and just running around. It's weird. Alright, anyway. Nightmares aside, I still get some nightmares about the movie every now and then, but, it's just around the time when I was about 15 or so, for some reason I just wanted to watch this movie again, and I'd watched it off and on for a couple of years, but, I think that was around the time when I started to recognize that, oh, wait, I really love this movie. And it just stuck. And we are going to talk about why. Why I love the movie and why everyone else should know.
Yeah. You want to give us a little plot summary?
Yes, I shall. Mrs. Brisby is a single mother mouse trying to look after her 4 children not long after the death of her husband, Jonathan. One day, her second youngest, Timothy, falls ill with pneumonia right around the time the farmer is going to plow the field. Mrs. Brisby endures perilous dangers such as the farmer's cat dragon, and even visits the great owl to try and find a way to save her son, culminating in visiting a group of rats living in the farmer's rosebush to talk to the mysterious Nicodemus and learn the secret of the connection between her husband and the rats.
Mysterious secrets.
The secret of NIMH. Aha.
Oh,
yes,
wow.
one might say.
I get it.
That's chaos theory.
Yes. And this movie does have a really kind of air of mystery about it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. It's so it's about a mouse, and
it's
probably something to be said about how a lot of animated movies and stories have mouse protagonists.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is.
Yeah, especially children's stories.
Yeah.
That was going to be my guess, is maybe it's because, children are small, so it's something they can relate to a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, and mice are kind of cute, but at the same time, you don't want them in your house.
Yeah.
Unless they're a pet, I don't know.
Or unless they talk.
I really like... Yeah.
I know, yeah, unless they talk.
I really like the whole mouse world aesthetic, small creatures making use of, the big wide world, using thimbles as teacups and needles as swords and what have you, and thread and...
Little baskets as lifts.
Yeah.
And because this is Don Bluth turning cats into, hideous demon monsters of rampaging death.
We can talk about that, because there's a lot of really clever things that this movie does in terms of perspective and such. And even the mouse aesthetic of, using small things to us as big things comes into play a bit when the rats talk about their plan and how they... Well, we can talk about that in spoilers.
Yes, for sure.
Should we talk a little bit about Don Bluth?
Yes, we should. Don Bluth was an animator at Disney from... I'll just do a quick Wikipedia check.
Late 70s, early 80s, would you say?
I think his first movie was actually Sleeping Beauty with Disney.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he came in. He was in the studio for a long time.
Yeah, he went uncredited for a lot of those. But
right.
There are a lot of characters in there where you can see who he worked on. Like the Jungle Book, there's a scene where Mowgli is in the tree with Bagheera, and Kaa, hypnotizes them. There's a bit where you can see where Don Bluth took over for Mowgli, because he moves in the way that a Don Bluth character would move, and his hair tuft is like a Don Bluth hair tuft.
Yeah, Don Bluth definitely has a very distinct and recognizable style.
You can definitely see it more in the 70s Disney movies. Like, in particular, Pete's dragon looks very Luthian.
He was the animation director, I think. He didn't design Elliot the Dragon, but his, fingerprints are all over that animation.
You can see bits of him, too, in Winnie the Pooh. There's a scene with Rabbit in the forest, and he's scared, and like that.
That's very
such
Don Bluth.
A very, very Don Bluth.
You can even see Rabbit in this movie.
Yeah, I actually noticed that when I was watching the clips. It's like, oh wow, that character is colored exactly the same as Rabbit from Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah. And he also did the animation for the 3 rabbit children in Robin Hood, and they sort of make the basis for Teresa, Martin, and Cynthia.
And those are very, very much his style. I'm not quite sure what it is. I think, is it fair to say his characters tend to have like a low center of gravity that gives them kind of a different weight than some other animators?
I'd say that's kind of what I observed.
Yeah. And something about the way he animates mouths as well is very distinct.
Yeah. Sometimes, they can be normal, and other times he can, have them really exaggerated and kind of blah, 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 like their tongues are coming out. And then other times when it's a villain, mostly they have, really gnarly teeth and...
Yeah. Big eyebrows.
Yeah, big eyebrows. Except for Nicodemus. He is very gnarly, but he is a good guy.
That's true. Those Don Bluth eyebrows, though, if only we could pick out the villain in this movie by some trademark of his. We'll get to him.
Is it the rat in dark colors and with huge eyebrows? And gnarly teeth?
I don't know. I think he's a trustworthy fellow.
Of course.
But we'll talk about Jenner a little bit later.
So yeah, Don Bluth was generally unsatisfied with the direction Disney was going after Walt died, and it culminated around the time when The Rescuers was out, or when they were making The Rescuers, and he was very dissatisfied with the animation for the mice in particular.
Yeah, I definitely heard that story about, for some reason they didn't color in the whites of the eyes on the characters, and that really pissed him off.
I had never thought about that as a kid, but, I just thought it was a style, and I kind of dug it, but, I didn't realize that it was just to cut corners.
Wow.
Because I think in The Rescuers Down Under, they keep that style, but...
No, they do have white eyes in The Rescuers
Down
Under.
They do?
Yep.
Oh.
They do.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't see the original Rescuers till I was an adult, but I watched Down Under as a kid, and I remember that for sure.
Yeah.
The style is, totally different.
It is. Well, it was almost, 15 years or so.
Yeah. I do have to say, The Rescuers Down Under was the very first Disney movie that used the cap system, so it was the first digital ink and paint versus The Rescuers, which was 100%, Disney's xerography era.
And it made extensive use of, CGI and such for the flight scenes and all that.
Side note, that movie is gorgeous.
It is. We can talk about that one later.
Yeah.
But I think around when he was still working on The Fox and the Hound, around the time he left, he was working on Widow Tweed and the Cow, especially in a certain scene. So he left around 1979 to form his own studio, and they did a little short called Banjo the Woodpile Cat. It was basically a little cat is dissatisfied with his life on the farm and decides to run away, so it's basically an American Tale, but with cats.
Or the story of him leaving the studio.
Oh yeah, basically.
It even has the same, in American Tale, there's the song, where in Banjo the Woodpile Cat, it's you stick with me, and it's the same song. It is literally the same song.
It's got Scatman Crothers.
Wow.
I, for one, am always for Scatman Crothers being in more things.
Yeah, being cats especially. Yeah. So yeah, this movie came about because they actually had workshopped it around at Disney for a while, and Don Bluth was really into it, and I think one of the animators, I want to say Ken Adams, is that an animator?
There's a Ken Burns, I think? I don't know.
Well, someone named Ken. Hold on, it's in the...
To Wikipedia!
I have a very interesting link here that we can put in the description.
Yeah, definitely. It's got so many notes on the production of this
about
movie.
The production.
While Jason looks for that.
You can fill in this dead silence.
My history with this movie is not very much. It's not one that I watched as a kid. I think my cousins had had it on VHS. I might have seen it once or twice as a kid, but I didn't really watch it until I was an adult. And it's very good. And Carrie, you read the book, didn't you?
Yes, I did. In 5th grade English class, we read Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH. And yeah, in the original book, it's Mrs. Frisbee, where in this movie, it's Mrs. Brisby.
That's because of a copyright with Hasbro.
Yes, of course. So, like, being an obnoxious 10-year-old, I was like, but that's not what it's like in the book. And so I don't think I fully appreciated it at first. And also, I wasn't the, crazy animation fan that I am now. So it's like I didn't really appreciate all the atmosphere and the great little details that Don Bluth brought back to animation after, like, the 70s Disney. And as an adult, I came back and watched it, and I was definitely blown away. Again, it's like I kind of needed an adult understanding, and also I needed not my child bias of having read the book first.
Yeah. And this movie, it's got a really cool atmosphere to it. It's a small-scale story, because they are mice, but, like, that doesn't diminish it. And it's got a nice, warm color palette, and
it just has a nice, like, feel to it.
A nice feel.
Yeah, it can be very dark, and the animation really reflects the mood for certain scenes, but, like, there are other scenes where, I think outside in particular, when, like, it's almost sunset, like the scene where Mrs. Brisby meets Jeremy for the first time, it's like, it has a very nice, like, golden feel to it, I think.
Yeah, and the whole movie, it's very cohesive in that way.
Yeah, I found the name, by the way.
Okay, the name. Woohoo.
Ken Anderson. He was the one who did the design for Elliot, and he worked really close with Don Bluth. And he actually gave the book, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH, to Don and said, you should direct this. But Disney was like, nah, we already have a mouse movie, and we have a mouse character. We don't need to make this.
Yeah, like, that's the main thing I think Don Bluth didn't like about Disney, is just the corporate culture there at the time, where they were kind of stuck in this rut of, well, I'm not sure that that's what Walt would have wanted. And so, you know, it's kind of like they had these curmudgeon-y studio executives who basically said no to everything and just kind of didn't care, and they were content just putting out these cute little family movies, which were absolutely still good movies. Like, their animators were just too good to not put out good movies, but still, it's just, it didn't have the same effort and the same like creative openness to new ideas and ambition that Disney used to be known for back in like the 30s and 40s.
Definitely, and when you look at all of Disney's works, like, as a timeline, you can definitely see it. There's a dip. Whether you like the movies, you know, on a personal level or not, there was definitely a shift in the studio.
Yeah, like, especially between, like, the 50s movies, like Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, and then all of a sudden you get into the 70s, and it's like the Aristocats and Robin Hood, which, you know, they're still fun movies, but, you know, they're cute, more kids' movies.
Yeah, they're not to the same level of, you know, artistic, whatchamacallit, as
standards,
Sleeping Beauty or Bambi.
Yeah, the character animation is still gorgeous, though. Like, I mean,
like, it's so gorgeous they used it twice.
Yeah, they used it more than twice.
Yeah, they started reusing animation, too. Like, a lot of people joke about the Cal Arts style, that they are obsessed with Madame Medusa from The Rescuers because of, like, her mouth shape with the teeth and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, hugely, those later animated movies were still hugely influential in modern animation.
Totally.
But that's enough about Disney.
I apologize. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to, like, Disney animators and Disney history. So if I go off topic, fine. I'm sorry.
That's
no worries. It's all relevant.
Yeah.
So we're introduced to Mrs. Brisby, and she's adorable.
She's
like immediately endearing. She has this. Her voice, it's kind of soft, shaky, like, she's not a big, bold, brave protagonist. She's a mouse.
She's very meek. She's very, you know, reserved, and she doesn't really like to go out very often. You can tell.
Yeah, she comes across as kind of like, you know, a normal parent who loves her kids, but she's not, like, exceptionally brave or exceptionally, like, gifted or anything.
Yeah, she'll go to great lengths for her children, but you can tell she's very, very terrified to do it.
Yeah.
Don Bluth does a very good job with that, where when they go into these scary environments, you can see her walking very timidly and her hands are like shaking while she will like cover her head and be looking around the corners nervously. Like they really get that tension.
Like that scene where Dragon first shows up and like scares the
Dragon being the
piss out of them.
terrifying cat in this movie. Yeah.
And like she like rears back and goes, "Oh!" Like she has her hands over her ears and she's like has her mouth like agape. It's like yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. And that makes her really unique. I can't really off the top of my head think of another character like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not aware of another animated movie that has a character like her.
That has like the mom as the main character, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if you made Bambi, but Bambi's mom was the protagonist.
That's actually a good analogy.
I don't know, even Bambi's mom kind of had more of a confidence about her, though.
Yeah.
Like
she was kind of, had more of a, I got this, let's go Bambi feel to her sometimes.
Whereas Mrs. Brisby, like she loves her little babies, but she's on her own now.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, Jonathan has just died recently, or at least a little time has passed, but he's still, like, it's been not that long ago. So she has to, like, sort of adapt to being a single parent.
In a world where she's just a tiny little mouse.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the plow scene, too, that freaking plow scene.
Jeez.
Where, like, freaking Armageddon is happening, and the shoe's screaming, and Mrs. Brisby's obviously, like, so terrified. She's like, I gotta try and stop that thing. Take my children, go! And she doesn't succeed. She almost fails. And it's like, but she still did it.
Yeah, what really got me after that scene is just seeing, like, the stress that she was under. And she's, like, reeling from, oh my god, this almost killed Timothy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that scene with her and Auntie Shrew talking in the grass, it's just a beautiful, really brief scene.
It's a great little beat, where she has to calm down.
Yeah, just and I like the lighting in that scene, the atmosphere of that scene, like, especially coming off of the plow scene, is so good.
Yeah. And credit to Aunt Shrew, too, for like, stepping up and being all, I got this.
Yeah, another thing is, in that scene, this is something I didn't think of, but the entire movie is animated by hand, with the exception of the plow. The plow is like that rotoscope. So it's a very interesting contrast where this thing looks cold and mechanical and not of this world, where the rest of the world is very rich.
Yeah, you can't even see the farmer's face when he's on it. Because you see it later.
Yeah, you do.
You do see him later, and he's actually modeled off Don Bluth. Because he, like, did the sort of, like, test footage for that.
Yeah. But you talking about how it's kind of cold and creepy and rotoscope kind of just reminds me of that mechanical mouse in An American Tail.
Oh, yeah. The Mouse of Minsk.
Yeah. Which, we could probably talk about that movie.
We could.
Later.
Yeah, An American Tail was the Don Bluth movie I grew up with. I love that movie.
Yeah, it really put him on the map.
That one and Land Before Time for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely like The Land Before Time, too.
Yeah.
Like, and it's this movie that really brought him to Steven Spielberg's attention, because Jerry Goldsmith, the composer, was friends with Spielberg. And he's like, oh, I did this movie called The Secret of NIMH. You should watch it. And Spielberg loved it. And through no fault of his own, it was released around the time E.T. was out. So it got buried by E.T.
Yeah.
But Spielberg liked it enough that he said, hey, we should make a movie together, and thus American Tail and Land Before Time.
Yeah, it is a shame this movie didn't do better at the box office, because it is great.
It's so
it
good.
managed to make back twice its budget, but it wasn't like, the success that they wanted it to be.
In your notes here, the budget was pretty small.
Yeah, $7 million for, like, his debut movie. That's not a lot compared to what Disney had with their budgets at the time, and they had less time than a Disney movie to make it.
Yeah, that's actually kind of comparable to the Disney budgets at the time. It wasn't until, like, well, okay, with the exception of The Black Cauldron, which I think was like $30 million. Yeah. That movie was ridiculously off the charts, though. But
yeah, took too long to make and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah,
and was it worth it? We'll talk about it later.
Yes,
for sure. But yeah, like 30 months from start to finish. Like nowadays in the animation production studios, these movies can take 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
I think 4 years is still the standard from green light to theatrical release.
Yeah, totally. And like the producers from Bluth Productions and Aurora had to, mortgage their houses so they could complete the movie near the end.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, totally. And it sort of paid off, but again, it wasn't the huge success that it needed to be, but it at least, put the studio out there so he could go on to make other movies that actually topped Disney with their respective movies they had.
Would it be fair to say this kind of became a cult classic?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially with, like, the Nostalgia Critic, this is one of his, like, absolute favorite movies, and I think that, like, I don't want to say that brought it to a wider audience to become aware of it, but it's definitely a movie that a lot more people know about now than knew about then.
Yeah, and I think when it was released on home video, it was passed around more, and, like, people saw it at the Blockbusters or Hollywood videos and like, oh, what's this? And word of mouth, and I think that sort of helped it to get more of a following than it had when it first came out.
Yeah. I do know that when we were watching movies as a group in, like, preschool, we watched An American Tail and we watched The Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven, but we did not watch The Secret of NIMH. So this definitely wasn't as well known widely as Don Bluth's later movies, but again,
yeah, but the home market definitely helped it, and it made it popular enough that they made a sequel. But we won't talk about that.
Not today.
Not today. I have words for that movie, but they will be later.
Choice words.
Choice words, indeed.
Yeah, we got to keep this episode G-rated, though.
Just like the movie. Just like the movie is G, even though they drop a damn.
They do drop a damn.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
So she visits the Great Owl to get some advice on how to, save her kids. And how about that scene, though?
That scene is like one of the quintessential scenes of this movie.
Good
for sure.
God. I could gush about this scene forever. The tone, the atmosphere, the way that Don Bluth uses negative space in the frame to make Mrs. Brisby looks small, and then there's this, like, scary as hell looking demonic spider, and then the owl talon comes down. It's just like, holy crap.
And then you see him, the camera slowly pans up and his eyes open, there's a flash, and, like, he does that owl thing where his head's, like, kind of upside down, and, like, you hear it crack as he brings it back up and around.
I adore this thing's design. Yeah. Fun fact about Becca, she absolutely loves owls, and this is one gnarly owl. He looks so decrepit. He's almost he's haunting.
Yeah,
he's covered in cobwebs, and he's got those glowing eyes. Which
and
how
those
did they
eyebrows.
Do that effect? Yeah, that effect.
Good question. How did they do that effect?
Didn't they shine? They like literally shone the light through the frame. Like they left
I
that
think
part of
so.
the frame unpainted.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's like backlighting is the technique, and this is something that Disney was not doing anymore that Don Bluth wanted to do, because Disney used to do this all the time in their old movies to generate like light effects. But again, in the 70s they were cutting corners, so Don Bluth said, hey, all these old things that Walt was doing that gave these films more life and more dynamics, let's bring them back.
This was definitely sort of the Bluth's response to the new slew of Disney movies and his want to bring the old feeling of Disney back into the 80s, the modern time as it was back then.
What I keep thinking about as we talk about it in comparison to Disney is to really go back to like Snow White and think of the scene in the woods, some of the gnarlier scenes in that movie.
Yes.
And like, I can see it,
This movie,
I can see that's where he's getting his inspiration.
Definitely, to me, this movie feels more like the Snow White, the Pinocchio, the movies that had the darker elements. Like, Disney kind of shied away from that a bit in the 50s and definitely in the 60s and 70s, but those first 3 or 4 movies were creepy as heck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, even in the article I've read for this to make the notes, there's, like, a thing where they talk about wanting to sort of match the like rhythm, the voice rhythm of the Disney movies, so a lot of the dialogue is sort of based off the old Disney movies, and there it mentions that Mrs. Brisby's line to Jeremy was, "I didn't mean to frighten you," was sort of based off Snow White.
Huh.
Yeah, I can see that. Good.
Yeah. So there was a lot of conscious effort to bring in a lot of the old Disney movie, tropes and such back into this, but slightly update it, just a little bit. And make it his own,
For sure. Yeah. I do think it's interesting that this, like, I don't want to talk about Disney too much, but, like, Don Bluth was doing, like, at the same time as this new crop of animators was coming up through Disney, they were both trying to revitalize the studio and bring it back to what it was like. Bluth kind of started his own, like, he did his own style thing where he wanted his movies to be a bit darker, a bit more, like, taking their audience seriously like Walt did, and, like, at the same time as Bluth was doing An American Tail at Disney, you had Ron Clements and John Musker doing The Great Mouse Detective, which, again, that was, like, kind of one of Disney's coming back and trying to make this really higher quality film again type thing. Yeah. And Bluth beat them at the box office. So for a time, it was like, oh my God, is Disney going to die? Don Bluth might be the new Walt Disney Studios. Like, Disney was actually considering shutting down their animation studio for a while because they were, you know, they were getting beaten at their own game because Don Bluth was so good at it.
Yeah. And I gotta say, on that, if anyone's interested in the history of the studio around that time, I think it's 1984 to 1999, there's this documentary, Waking Sleeping Beauty, which I highly recommend. Yes. It goes into depth about all of this.
A lot of it.
Yeah, it's from the Disney side, but, yeah. Well, obviously.
Still pretty fair and informative, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an interview that Don Bluth did, which sounded like a quote that Walt did. Like, Walt had a famous quote about how you have to show the happy light moments to give the dark moments their levity. And at the same time, you have to have the light moments to, or you have to have the dark moments to appreciate how good the light is. Don Bluth said almost exactly the same thing in an interview during a TV interview. He said, you have to show the darkness in order to appreciate the light. And so, I mean, he goes super dark in his movies. That's kind of one of his hallmarks.
He does.
But, like, now that I'm thinking about it in comparison to, you know, some of the older Disney movies, it's not unreasonably dark. No. It's not really any darker than the darkest moments in Pinocchio or something.
No,
Pinocchio is way worse. As somebody who loves Pinocchio.
Yeah, and the book is worse. If you've never read the book, don't.
I liked the book.
The book is freaky. Well, actually, just one scene is freaky, but that's tangent. Anyway, about the levity of the movie. There are a lot of scenes where you will have, especially after a tense moment, like the dragon chase scene, you have Jeremy coming in and being all like, hey, Miss Mouse, don't worry, I'm okay.
I have opinions about Jeremy.
We'll get to that. But and also, well, Jeremy is actually a lot of the levity of this movie, so we should talk about him.
Our resident Dom DeLuise.
Dom DeLuise.
Yes.
What a great man.
Favorites. Yeah. To me, Jeremy is like, he's right on the line of too much and just enough. Like, I think the only thing that saves him from being straight up annoying to me is the fact that Mrs. Brisby is also exasperated by him.
So annoying.
Yeah, so it helps soften it a little bit. Otherwise, he could very easily kind of, you know, go too far.
He could make or break the movie for some people.
Yeah.
He's not in the movie for that much, and you can tell he's there just to sort of lighten the mood. But he has a purpose as mainly a chauffeur. But also, the scenes where Mrs. Brisby just tries to get him out of her way are great. They have great chemistry. Like, I especially love the scene where she just sees him again for, like, the second to last time in the movie, and she tells him to go get some string, and he's like, all right, but that'll take all day. Good! Now get going! And then finally, will you get going? That's like the only time she raises her voice in the movie.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the voice cast in that regard. Elizabeth Hartman in her last movie role, sadly, as Mrs. Brisby. Perfect casting, I believe.
Excellent.
I'm not for sure. I'm not familiar with a lot of the cast, unfortunately. I know the name Will Wheaton as little Martin Brisby.
Yes, little crapbird Martin Brisby.
Oh, that's mean. He's just a little brat.
He is. He owns up to it sometimes, but he is a little brat.
I like that. Like, as
bratty
Leslie. As he can be, as bratty as he can be, he has that moment early on where, like, he's upset his mother a little bit. He's genuinely remorseful, so he's not a bad kid. He's just...
No. it's understandable too, because like their mom has to be away for a while to figure out what's wrong with Timmy. His dad just died. Like, there's a lot of underlying emotional like reasons for how the characters are acting the way they are.
And I really like that moment where he's remorseful, because like that endears me to him for the rest of the movie, even when he's being,
Yeah.
Yeah, as we all know, kids are perfect angels. They never yell at their parents or get upset at them.
They never yell at their elders and call them loudmouths.
Oh, goodness. Well.
Then you got, like, the supporting cast. Hermione Baddeley as Auntie Shrew is great. Oh, she's got a haughty air to her, but also, like, when the chips are down, she'll be there for the kids. And like, you have John Carradine as the Great Owl is awesome.
Fantastic, yeah. For like his one scene, and he steals the show. Yeah, he just steals the show.
He's a classically trained actor, and he had arthritis and such, and he had trouble moving. And I think he showed up drunk for one recording session, and they kind of had to sober him up. And then, like when he was sober enough, he's like, "All right, let's do this," and he went in and just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Derek Jacobi or whatever as the prototype for like Dumbledore.
Yeah.
Or like a Gandalf-like character, which is funny considering his friendship with Ian McKellen.
Nicodemus is a really rad character. He's so gnarly and creepy. Like, you look at him, that's the villain, but it's not.
Yeah,
he's a cool grandpa.
Like, he's cast in shadow for most of the beginning of the movie, and he only shows up for a couple scenes, but you wonder, who is this guy? He's interesting. Glowing eyes, that's neat.
He's a very mysterious character.
And he's kind of weird, because I don't think he's a rat, but I don't think he has ears.
Oh, yeah?
His head's just kind of round, and it's kind of odd.
Well, like, a lot of the rats don't really look like rats in this movie.
I find they do. Like, he looks like something else entirely, though, to me. Like, it's only the snout. Yeah.
Kinda.
Yeah. Speaking of the rats, shall we speak of the rats?
Yes, let's speak of the rats. Okay, so Mrs. Brisby goes to the rose bush and learns about how her husband died and how the rats gain their intelligence through, NIMH's experimentation. NIMH is the National Institute of Mental Health. It's a real thing, and I don't know how they felt about this movie because I couldn't find anything. But
if they had to change the name Frisbee to Brisby for copyright reasons, I wonder how that went over.
Yeah, I don't know. But Mrs. Brisby's husband, Jonathan, helped the rats escape. He was small enough that he could, climb out of a locked air vent and unlock it. And
so he's like a savior to the rats. That's why whenever anyone hears her name, Mrs. Brisby, Jonathan Brisby's wife. Oh, well, we'll help you.
You have no first name of your own. You're Mrs. Jonathan Brisby.
Yeah.
And so they tell her about their plan, because the whole thing about the rats is they have electricity, and they've been using a lot of the efforts from the farmhouse to make their sort of utopia under the rosebush. But they have become intelligent enough that they kind of feel remorse about that, and they feel guilt about stealing from the farmer. So their plan is to move to a place called Thorn Valley, where they can sort of build their civilization from their own two hands, And some of them are really behind that plan, like Justin, the captain of the guard, and Mr. Aegis, who was the only other mouse in their group apart from Jonathan. But some of them are opposed to that plan, like Jenner, the previously mentioned dark-colored, huge eyebrow, gnarly teeth man that we talked about.
Totally not the villain.
Totally not the villain.
He seems honest.
He's sort of like the conspirator, like, I don't know, the Brutus, if you will, of the piece. And he has a plan to sort of kill Nicodemus and take over by using their efforts to help move the Brisby house, which is just a cement block, and move it to the protective side of a stone they're next to keep it away from the plow. He's going to use that to sort of, cut the lines and drop the block on Nicodemus to make it look like an accident. But Mrs. Brisby finds out that NIMH is coming back, and she tries to tell them all that, hey, NIMH's coming back, we gotta get out of here. And Jenner is hugely opposed to that, almost kills her because of that, and gets into a huge, awesome sword fight with Justin for it. The whole climax of this movie is great. Let's just talk about that.
Yeah, awesome sword fight. The sword fight, I like how scrambly it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is actually taken from a couple other movies, like a movie called Vikings, was a lot of the choreography for that. And then when Justin goes in for the stab for Jenner, it's taken from The Adventures of Robin Hood, I think the title is. It's the one with, I think, Basil Rathbone? It's a very classic scene.
Yeah, I like that it's not overblown. Like, a slash... It looks like a scratch compared to what you see in other movies, but it does the damage that a sword slash would do. When he does stab Jenner, he doesn't run him through. He just gets him in the gut. And
it hurts. I mean, you can tell it hurts.
Absolutely. There's something very real and grounded about these two rats having a sword fight.
Yeah, and it should be ridiculous when you really think about it, but like the music by Jerry Goldsmith and the choreography and the like camera angles and the animation, especially like the scene is like just colored so well, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you think about it, because like the sky is cloudy and such, but the whole backgrounds look orange and glowy, but it looks amazing.
It's that warm color palette.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then
it's the climax color palette.
Yeah, there you go. And like right after that, we get the meat of the story with the climax of the children, and the block is in the mud now, and it's gonna sink, and the children are all inside, and Auntie Shrew.
And like the most epic score ever in the soundtrack. Yeah. My lord.
They're all scrambling to try and get a rope around the block, but then it like breaks and it sinks, and Mrs. Brisby is just horrified in watching it sink, and she's...
It's so sad when Justin's like pulling her back, but she's trying to, like, she can't do anything at this point, but she's still trying to get to her kids.
Her eyes are just wide in terror, and then we haven't talked about the amulet. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be forgiven for forgetting about the amulet though, because it kind of comes out of nowhere.
It kind of does, and it kind of isn't explained a lot. It's just that during the scene where Nicodemus is telling her the whole story about Nim and their plan, he kind of just says, "Oh, hey, I have a gift. Jonathan meant this for you." And it's just a neat little red amulet, and it has this power over the other characters. You see it in Jeremy, who calls it a sparkly and kind of wants it.
Well, that's just a crow thing.
Yeah, but then also Jenner, he sees it when he's trying to chase Mrs. Brisby off, and he's like, "Oh, the stone." And it's like, whoa, what's the stone? What is this? And it's never actually explained what it is.
And it's odd, because this movie is so grounded otherwise, and a lot of there's science to it, right? Like, they escaped from the mental institute where they all became intelligent, not through magic, but through injection. And then this amulet.
And there is some mysticism with Nicodemus, too, and how he can sort of like... He kind of like gestures towards his cane, and it sort of floats towards him. So there is a lot of mysticism.
Yeah, they do definitely tease the supernatural elements, and
maybe it's like an X-Men thing, and like there's a mutation.
See, like, honestly,
Nicodemus's powers.
Honestly, even in the scenes that are just about like the electricity, it's almost framed as if it's a supernatural thing. Like there's a lot of sparks and shimmers, and it almost looks like magic. And
to a mouse, wouldn't it be, though?
Yeah, definitely.
What is this techno-wizardry?
Yeah, during the scene where they're all trying to scramble to get the block up, Mrs. Brisby drops the amulet into the mud and it sinks. But then, like, after the block sinks and she's at her lowest moment, the amulet shoots up and sort of hovers above her, and then Nicodemus's words about courage of the heart is very rare. The stone has a power when it's there, and she sort of grabs it, and it burns her, and she like flings it away, but then she picks it back up because she thinks it'll help her lift the house, and it does, and it's amazing. Wow. And it's like, what the hell is this stone? But
we never find out.
But there is a quote from Don Bluth, and he said that the amulet was a device or symbol to represent the internal power of Mrs. Brisby. It also was a gift from her husband, a sign of his love. The stone/amulet had no power itself. It was only when Mrs. Brisby's strength was employed that it could become a force. In many ways, it was an extension of Mrs. Brisby, a visual extension of an internal and harder to show in a film power. So that sort of, when I read that, it sort of flipped my whole thing about the stone on its head. So it's like, oh, so it's just sort of open to interpretation, and it is just a powerless stone by itself, but when Mrs. Brisby exemplifies great courage, then it has power. And like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you apply logic to it, but like...
No, but with that explanation, I can dig it.
Yeah, when you see it happen, when she shows the courage to want to save her family, and then the stone rises from the mud and it's like levitates, and is just plopped onto the protective side of the stone. It's great.
What? Leaving things open to interpretation, but this is supposed to be a children's movie. We can't have the children thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
And you even get a little tease of it when, like, there's a pause when Jenner's trying to, like, scare her away and Justin shows up to help her. The stone sort of flashes because I think Mrs. Brisby is sort of being brave at that moment. I think that's a clue that it's tied into that.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
It's up to interpretation.
Indeed.
And so, Jason, you have a note in our notes about a cut character.
Oh, yes, that's right. There were a lot, well, any movie's going to have a lot of changes between, the initial, script and the final version. So the original script, I should say, was written by a man named Stephen Barnes, and it more followed the book. And then, with each draft, it got a little different. And one of the characters in one of the later drafts was a rat named Isabella, who was a girl. And she had a bit of a crush on Justin, and whether or not that was followed up on remains to be seen. But she was kind of the Motormouth character and sort of another support for Mrs. Brisby.
I don't think a character like that was needed.
Probably not.
Yeah. Just from your brief description, there's no need for a love interest.
No.
Auntie Shrew's the Motormouth, Jeremy's the Motormouth, there's enough.
Yeah.
This is something that Bluth does, is that he kind of just gives love interest to people randomly. Like, at the end of Anastasia, Bartok suddenly gets a love interest out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
At the end of this movie.
Who are you, Pink Pat?
And at the end of this movie, doesn't another crow show up?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
She does. Yeah, she does. But, that was the conclusion of Jeremy's character arc.
And I was thinking about it, too, as I was watching it again. A lot of men in this movie. A lot of male rats.
Yeah. You called it a mass fest.
Yeah, total peen scene. But then... but I was able to justify it, at a research facility where they're doing experiments on small rodents. Of course they have the sexes segregated.
Yeah, that's true.
So I
hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah. I was thinking, oh, why is it so many boys? But then they cut to the scene of them all, in the tanks. It's like, oh, of course, they have the test batch separated. That makes sense. So I can let it slide this time.
Yeah, this time.
But we got our eyes on you, Don Bluth.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It would have been nice to have a bit more, female diversity and have some more, female rats, but it's fine.
To be fair, Don Bluth, he has plenty of gender diversity in his movies. So,
oh, he does.
Yeah.
He does.
It's true. Yeah. It's just looking at, the crowd scenes with rats, it's like, they're all dudes. What? Weird.
They're all dudes.
That's fine, though.
Yeah. They're all dudes. Dudes.
They're all dudes. How's it going, dude?
Just a quick note on the rats. There's a line, Nicodemus says something about how, they can no longer live as rats. They know too much. Ooh, I like that.
That's the whole basis of their plan and why they want to move to Thorn Valley and why some of the rats, Jenner especially, are so opposed to that plan. They want, to be complacent in their, intelligence, and they want to live off what's easy. They want to have, resources available to them.
Yeah. I just really like that line. It just really stuck with me on this watch.
Yeah.
There are definitely a lot of deeper things going on with this where you can ask, oh shoot, there is this next evolution, but does that mean leaving behind what makes us in the first place?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's just so evocative. It's like, okay, what does that mean then? And we never really get to see
and it gives more weight to Jenner's line too in the climax where he says, "I've learned this much. Take what you can when you can." Like that, they're total different, ideology than what Nicodemus has and what Justin has, because Justin then says, "Then you've learned nothing."
Yeah.
On that, let's talk about a bit. There's another quote I have here about how a lot was changed from the book to the movie and how it was a lot to do with, character development. And Don Bluth mentioned that a lot of the story changes that came from a need to make the characters grow, like how Nicodemus dies in this version. It was to sort of change Justin from being this sort of aloof, prankster character into being more of a leader at the end when he steps up and saves Mrs. Brisby from Jenner and sort of takes charge and says, "We're going to Thorn Valley. Let's go."
Do you have anything to say, Carrie, in regards to the differences between the book and the movie?
I don't. Okay, it's been forever since I've read this. I have not read it again since I was 10 years old, but I do remember the biggest changes. When I remember watching the movie, I'm like, oh wow, Nicodemus is so old in this. Like in the book, I just got the sense that all the rats were of similar age, but I'm not sure if that was just my kid mind.
No, I think he was meant to be a little younger in the book.
Yeah,
it's a little odd that he's, like that.
He could have just been an older rat that they found.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, the big change, the NIMH scene in the book was way longer. In the movie, they skirt over it in about 10 seconds, where in the book, there's this entire, several chapter long sequence where they're explaining what happened with the experiments, what it was like for them to suddenly awake to this new level of consciousness. Their entire escape was, spelled out in very lengthy descriptions. And again, in the movie, it's they talk about what happened and it's over in about 30 seconds. So that I definitely
That's a great
remember.
scene, though.
It is a great scene. And a lot of the original drafts had a lot of cutbacks to NIMH, but they wanted to trim those down until eventually it was nothing because they wanted the focus to be on Mrs. Brisby and her kids. That's the core of the movie. The emotional core and pretty much her, kickoff to get involved with the Rats of NIMH, because that's a subplot, even though it's very important.
It's true. I do like that the NIMH scene, it's so brief and it's so surreal, because if you think about it, this is something beyond what Mrs. Brisby can really understand. From a mouse's perspective, the idea of scientific experiments in a facility, she can't comprehend that. So putting it in that light, that surreal, almost nightmarish scene, it's very good.
Very good.
You were saying, Carrie?
The other big difference is that the book focuses a lot more on the rats once you are introduced to the rats. It focuses almost more on, oh my gosh, NIMH is coming for the rats and the decision on Thorn Valley than it focuses on Mrs. Frisby in the book. The movie kind of the movie ties itself up into a neat action climax, where the book is a lot more, it still has a climax, but it's more spread out. It's not as much of an immediate, oh my gosh moment.
How did the climax go in the book?
I don't remember.
Yeah. Because I know in a lot of the earlier drafts, there were scenes with the rose bush.
Yes, exactly.
They moved the house, and then the next day, Mrs. Brisby's helping them move out of the rose bush, and then some of her kids go to the rose bush, and they get trapped.
There we go.
Mrs. Brisby has to save them, and she gets trapped, and then she has to overcome her fears in a character development moment, and that's how the movie ends.
So the movie is another hour long,
probably.
Yeah, I think I think that is the original book ending. Is just it focuses on NIMH and the exterminators coming for the rats and them escaping the rose bush, and that's the climax.
Yeah, that makes sense. But this is Mrs. Brisby's story in the movie, so not really showing how the rats escaped and how they got all that stuff out of there.
Because that's not part of her story.
No, you didn't need to see that. They just say that they escaped, and will we see them again? Maybe in a sequel that comes out 15 years later.
Uh-oh, that sounds fantastic.
That sounds like a bunch of crap.
No!
It could have been great, but that's another story.
Yes, that is indeed another story. Anything else to say?
I love this movie. That's what I have to say.
I am glad that I discovered this movie as an adult, and
yeah, it's still one of my it's still my favorite Don Bluth movie, and one of the many that many people say is his best. And I agree.
Yeah, I do think this is Don Bluth's best. You can make a case for the other ones, but on a pure, the level of things that are good in this are way higher, in my opinion.
For sure. There's a lot more, mythos to the movie, and a lot of more, themes, intelligence and what to do with said intelligence, and it's just great. Great stuff.
Yeah, so do we recommend it?
Heck yeah.
Yes, 100%.
Yes. Damn, yes. We can say damn because they say it in the movie.
Because they said it in the movie, yes.
Yes, okay, that officially makes it kid-friendly. Damn,
yes, it's
damn, damn, damn.
I've grown accustomed to her rats.
Oh, God.
That's a totally different ending to a movie right there.
Yes. Wow. So, like, this movie, in the context of Don Bluth's work, a lot of his later movies had more of the elements that were kind of annoying to sit through. Like, I love All Dogs Go to Heaven, but the songs are just kind of and there's a lot of
they feel
things.
So out of place.
Yeah. So, like, those movies have all the same kind of, like, deep, like, not meta-contextual, like...
regular contextual
metaphysical questions, but you know, they have more elements that aren't forming a cohesive whole. You have to ignore more stuff to get to the good stuff.
Yeah, and then you have to ignore a whole lot in some of his 90s movies.
Oof.
But it doesn't work for some of them. And he will readily admit that. So
studio meddling.
I was so disappointed by Titan AE.
I've never seen that. We should watch it for the podcast.
It has good animation, but yeah. Ugh.
Yeah,
I wanted to like that movie, but...
I wanted to love that movie.
Yeah.
I need to see it for the podcast. Then we can talk about it. That's like the only Don Bluth movie I haven't seen yet.
Well, we need
shall
to.
we sign off then?
Yes, I suppose we should.
Yes. So thank you to Mitch McGraw for our delightful theme song. You can find him at Mitch D. McGraw on Twitter. My name is Becca McGraw. You can find my digital art and a little bit of animation at rebexorcist.com.
My name is Jason Knott. You can find some of my reviews of animated movies, live-action movies, and everything else in between on my review site, Whatever Reviews, at blogger.com.
And my name is Carrie Dreblow, and you can find me on YouTube at Animation Critic, all one word. Currently, I am working on the summer 2018 anime season, but I plan to expand to other animation things in the future, so check me out.
So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. We appreciate your
patronage. Go watch a traumatizing movie about rats.
Now go forth and be traumatized.
Yes. Thank you,
Yay,
Don
verily.
Bluth. Yay, verily. Mitch, pull me out.
Light us out, Mitch.
One second. You can cut this dead air out.
This is what the notes are for, sweetie.
Is it there in the notes?
No.
Damn it. I didn't put it in the notes. What's wrong with me? What is wrong with me?
Shun.
Shun.
Shun, the non-note taker. Shun.